This is a talk with the candidate session with County Executive Marc Elrich, who is also a candidate for County Executive this year. And we welcome you from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County. Tu Cámara, for those of you who are Spanish speaking, that means your chamber. And we welcome Marc Elrich to come and talk to us today. For those who are not able to make it today, we will have this interview and discussion available on YouTube through the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce website, hvcmc.org. Well, welcome, Marc Elrich, and thank you for being here with us. I appreciate your coming over to join us and the members at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Please tell us a little bit about where you are and how are things going. And after you do, you talk to us about what your thinking is and what your plans are. We'll have a few questions for you that we have gathered. Thank you.
So I think I'm doing okay. I had my COVID case. So I have that behind me for the moment. We've been through, two really difficult years, and it's been difficult for everybody. And, the business community, residents, government, none of us were immune from the impacts of this. We had to very rapidly pivot our workforce. And our challenge was we didn't want to have a lot of people getting paid and not doing work. We pivoted people to do jobs we needed during COVID that weren't necessarily the jobs that they had when they were, doing their normal day-to-day work. So rec workers began, operated centers for testing, and librarians were pulled into all this stuff. So we basically were able to maintain a pretty high level of county services through the pandemic. We made some really hard decisions, masking. I wish we had done it 2 weeks earlier because it was really clear that at the end of the day, masking was probably the number one thing that actually matters in what you do. We started out without, no vaccines, no testing, trying to navigate this without knowing what exactly the virus would do and how it acted. All that took a little while to settle, but pretty early on, I'd say by the end of the second week, it was clear this was person-to-person transmission. And what we realized was that if we could break the person-to-person transmission, then we could cut down on the spread of the disease. So you'll see Montgomery County go from the first hit in the state, first 3 cases, I think even in the region, and then very quickly, the worst place in the region because the thing took off like crazy here once it started. And to think that it started with 3 people is kind of mind-boggling. And then we go from that to being the best place in the region because we applied what we knew. And when we realized that if we could break human-to-human contact, then we could put this thing in on a more moderate course. And that was the hardest decision to make, obviously, because breaking the human-human contact means keeping you apart from each other. And that was the decision we made. So whether it was occupancy limits or masking or closing some things, all those things actually made us safer. And once we got control of it, we were able to keep it under control. And we always had this test pad because we went one way and the governor went a different way. And every time the governor loosened up, his cases spiked. And that didn't happen with us. And that was pretty significant. You always want to know, like, am I making the right decision? It was good to have validators all around you where you could see that if they went in a different direction, they were going to get different outcomes. So that's really helped. And what I feel right now is, we're in a lull. We don't know, we know there's another variant out there. It's going through Europe now. All the numbers indicate in major European countries, they're on an upward trend again, and China's on lockdown again. We're hoping that because we're so heavily vaccinated that we won't get hit the same way. And we're also hoping, and I think this is true, that we know what to do. If it comes back and it starts spreading, we'll just mask up again, because that will go a significant distance. And I think we know also that we need to get people into N95 masks, not just cloth masks, because there is a difference in protection levels. But I think we're in a much better position to manage this now. You've got treatments, and you've got adequate amount of testing out there, and you're sitting on vaccines. Now the vaccines are going to have to change. They're going to have to make one based on Omicron, but they're already working on it. That's one of the great miracles that we had nothing to do with directly. But the fact they discovered a vaccine and could implement it in less than a year is nothing less than a miracle, because this would normally have taken several years to do. So everything is kind of in the right place for being able to manage it, as long as we remember what it took to manage it the first time. So I feel like, we're in a much better position than we were when this started. But there is life beyond COVID. And that's one of the things about what we tried to do in my administration was remember that every problem we were facing when we came into office was going to be there after COVID went away. And so instead of saying, okay, we're taking a break from our job of moving forward, we actually continued to push things forward while we were dealing with the various forms of the virus. And so, the first thing we did is Cindy Katz and I went out, we did a listening tour. We went to small businesses. We had them tell us why they hated us and why they told their friends not to come here. I'm not joking about that. That's what people would tell us. If somebody says, should I come to Montgomery County? I'll tell them no. So we invited them in to meet with us and to find out, so what are the obstacles you find in Montgomery County? And most importantly, what makes us different than other people? And it's not really money. More than anything, it's the torture and the pain we put people through, the difficulty of getting through processes in the county. So Sydney and I did 5 or 6 meetings with the business community. And our managers actually came to those meetings. So people from permitting and procurement actually sat in those meetings to hear what people had to say. And then people went about going back with a set of recommendations to make changes. And we made big changes in our permitting department. It is a lot faster to get a permit now. It's a lot easier to get a permit now. In the old days, if you submitted a permit and an inspector came out and said, you failed this, you would be left to deal with it yourself. It's like, come, fix it and, call us when you're ready. Now we actually work with people. If we find something in the field that's wrong, we tell them what they need to do to fix it. We don't make it a mystery and say, you figure out what to do, talk to your architect. We let you rely on us to help you. And the same thing in the initial permitting process. When you submit your plans, instead of just saying, go bring your plans in here, we have pre-planned meetings where you and your architect and engineer can lay out what you're doing and tell us what you're going to need. And we'll tell you then whether you're going to go down the wrong path or not, so you can correct it before you ever come to us. So one of the big victories for us is we were able to deal with some major companies that had concerns about being able to get projects done in Montgomery County, including the possibility of not doing the project in Montgomery County. We reached out to them. We told them what we were going to do. We talked with our permitting people so they understood what they needed to do. And this wasn't where you just said, say yes to anything. It was because it's all got to be safe at the end of the day. We can't not do that. But it's how you help people get to safe and how you get people get to the right decision. And by helping in the beginning, people were able to get their projects done. There's a company called JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle. They do a lot of consulting for companies about where you should locate. And prior to all this, if you had gone to them and said, could the county get something approved and ready in X amount of time, they would tell the applicant, if you need a guarantee, I can't promise you anything. And what we've been able to do is to kind of turn this on its head and be able to get things moving and out the door faster. And the biggest victory is getting some of the applicants to actually be willing to be resources for other potential businesses and let them know that the county was able to and willing to deal with them differently than what we heard. I was very committed to changing the county's reputation because our reputation was not good. And so we worked on that. Procurement is, pretty similar. We had a pretty opaque process. It was pretty much an old boys network. It is hard to change an old boys network. This is something, we're still going after because no matter what you do, there are ways people find around, your processes. You've been in the world of bidding, so you can imagine how this works. But we did 2 things I think were really significant. First, we made a decision to give local preferences to businesses. So if you're bidding on something, you get points for being a Montgomery County company and not outside Montgomery County. And the reason we did that was we realized if it's a Virginia company or a Prince George's company, they've got offices and space in another county where they're paying taxes, right? They're renting space in another county, storing stuff there. Their employees likely come from another county and they bring them over here when they're doing a job. So there's this whole secondary level of money that would circulate back into the local economy that we were missing. And so if we just evaluated price against price, we're missing whether putting money in a local company means that the county is going to see a lot of that money that we just paid out one door coming back to the county through another door. And we realize we do that evaluation when we're trying to evaluate whether a company coming into Montgomery County, they call it the ancillary effects. What are the ancillary benefits you're going to get other than the company simply coming there? And we decided to apply that principle to evaluating bids that come into the county. And the second thing we did to reinforce that is we gave a price preference to Montgomery County businesses. So all things being equal, we'll pay more money to a county business than a non-county business, which means this is not driven by the low bidder. This now comes down to quality of the bid, not the price of the bid. And that was important. So we've seen real growth in small business contracting in Montgomery County, of minority contracting in Montgomery County. It's generally been an upward trend now for 2 years. And we think that's because we've deliberately favored local businesses. We just added veterans preference to the list of preferences we had so that local small businesses with veterans get a preference for contracts in the county. So we've been able to capture more and keep these things inside the county. And I think that helps all the small businesses here. When you feel like you can compete here and you have a chance, it becomes a much better process. And we're dealing with the bidding process. I'm very unhappy with the way bids are structured. I've gotten involved in a couple of things, and I could see how very subtly bids can be constructed to steer contracts to people, even though there's nothing in there that's overt. But my favorite example is if you've got 200 points you can earn, and there's no direction on what's difference between 43 points and 37 points, you get the picture. I can keep things close, but always make sure that the person I want to win wins. And there's nothing anybody, the winner or loser, can go back to in the point system and say, well, it's clear here that this was only worth 37 points. And of course, this was worth 43 points. So we're working on changing that. I've had discussions about a process that's basically a quality first process where you look at the quality of the bids and what you're going to get for it or value for bid and not focus on the price of the bid. So I think we continue to learn because we thought we did things and a couple of times it didn't turn out the way we thought it would turn out and went back and looked at it. And we became aware of these other sub-issues that are in there. So I'm committed to making this as transparent as possible. You can go on the county website. You can see all the bids that are out there. You know who the competition is. Our goal is to make it transparent, but our goal is also to make sure the local companies and minority companies get as much of the bidding as possible. And we know within the minority spread that while in some categories, some minorities do really well, but categories tend to be dominated by different groups. And you find very low participation in some categories and other categories. There's groups that get, the major amount of the business. And we're looking at how we can look at that and make sure that minority contracting isn't just in one field, but we've got the ability to make sure they can participate in more fields than that. So those are some of the, the big changes, I think we made in procurement. So, in the first year of the local business spend, after we changed it, went up 20%. And then after that, I think it's from $100 to $120 million next year, it went up another $9 million. So we're continuing to see growth in that spend. And I expect as more people get used to it. And also, folks in your community have to know we're doing this, which comes to another point that we've realized we need to we need to have better outreach to the business communities. And so we've been asked to make sure that when we have information, we distribute it through the local chambers. And so you're going to start seeing us using you as a conduit, if we are not doing it already, to make sure that your members know about things. We've assumed over all these years that everybody knows. You go to, there's a place to look for procurements, you go there. Not everybody does that. And if you've got a history of never getting a contract, you don't know that the rules have changed in Montgomery County, that you actually have a chance at a contract now. So we're going to work with the local chambers to make sure we can put more of that information out at the local level so that you're in a stronger position coming through this. In the beginning of the pandemic, we gave out a lot of money to the businesses. We thought, frankly, we were going to be open in June. So we originally planned for 2 months of, 2 months of a spend, and it was $25 million. Well, the $25 million evaporated, and then we don't have $25 million out there to spend every 2 months. And so we became much more dependent on the federal government than the state government. And the federal government really did step in. I've talked to tons of business owners who were able to take advantage of the federal program and the state program. When I go to see restaurant owners, pretty much everybody who's still standing can talk about their ability to get these loans. And some of them forgiven ultimately. They got them through the hard times of the pandemic. And I was lobbying the governor to put money out. I continue to lobby the governor to put more money out to the community. I think it's really critically important that we're able to better serve our communities who got hit by COVID and who lost job opportunities. We're doing other stuff. We're trying to bring childcare back. So we've been upping our spend every year. Last year, because of COVID, childcare didn't get used nearly as much. So we wound up with the $9 million unspent. Instead of using the $9 million to this year and say, okay, we just need to add 1 million because that's the 10 we expected, we actually added 11 million. So we've put $20 million into childcare this year to help people get back to work. Your workforce, you're probably seeing what we say. If people can't have childcare for the kids, they're not coming into work. They're not going to leave a little kid home alone. And if the wages aren't high enough, they're not coming into work because it's too much. So with working with the state, Montgomery County is going to continue to provide more subsidies to childcare so we can hopefully bring down the cost of childcare to families so that parents are more likely to go to work than decide to pay what I get and what I pay for childcare are too close together to make a difference. And I'd rather be home. So we're trying to deal with that. My bus rapid transit system is now actually being planned. After all those years of being on a piece of paper, we started on Route 29. We built the first stage of a BRT. We're going to finish it from actually going to put it in its own lane from New Hampshire Avenue into Silver Spring. We've put a bus rapid transit into this budget that'll connect Wheaton to Rockville. So it connects the two ends of the red line, but these are two important employment centers. And obviously, if you get to Rockville, you get access to all the jobs up and down the red line there. So it's going to improve access to jobs in the county, and it's a big deal for folks who don't have access to cars. Same way that putting the BRT on the east side of the county on Colesville Road served the population that often didn't have vehicles and would spend hours getting to a job, trying to ride a bus up and down there. We're going to be able to offer people much quicker transit, which we think will benefit businesses, because if people can't afford to live in downtown Bethesda, they better be able to get to downtown Bethesda. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to keep them as a workforce. We reformed the WorkSource in Montgomery, which is possibly one of the worst run organizations on the planet. And this is something the council felt that I felt. So when we reformed it, we did this together. We got a new WorkSource director. He radically changed the way that organization functioned. We went from almost doing no work in minority communities and not doing upskilling work. They focused on, they get you a job where you were. So if you're uneducated, they would find you a lousy job, but they weren't interested in that either. So they weren't even doing much of that. Now they're doing job training and upskilling the workforce so they can train people for the better jobs that are out there. And that's a huge improvement over where we were. So I look forward, they've gone from 5 employees to 35 employees, from serving very few people, mostly people who look like me who needed to be placed with their resumes. And now they're actually serving people who need to find work at the most basic level. I think we really do have good leadership over there. So we understand that we need to provide more opportunities in the county. We've got to address childcare and transportation. And a lot of it gets baked into what we're doing in the budget. And a couple of good things have happened. One, we maintained our AAA bond rating. And that's not a small thing because that helps the county borrow for less money. And the less I spend on interest, the more I can put into projects. And we did that through the pandemic. And the other thing we did, which I think is a big deal, the county has always had a 10% reserve policy. It has also never achieved the 10% reserve policy. This year, we budgeted the 10% reserve policy because we've made the budget. In the middle of this pandemic, over 2 years, we were able to increase our reserves so that we could actually meet our goals. And that's important because people think of it, oh, it's just a number. The difference is when we weren't making it, we had to put millions of dollars into the budget every year to increase our percentage. So if you were at 70%, you might put $10 million added to the budget just to go into that reserve fund. We had to put no money into the reserve fund this year. All your tax money went to programs, not into reserves. And so being able to free up that as a drain on our economy is a big deal. We were able to go into the employee retirement fund. We're overfunded. So we were able actually to draw some money out of that fund to bring it back down to a more reasonable level of funding. And that helped create space in this budget that otherwise wouldn't be there. And the other thing that was big is the charter change. We had this vote 2 years ago. We changed the charter, which limited the revenues, but not the taxes, which was really weird. Like you could get an assessment increase, your tax bill could go up, and then the county would have to lower the amount of money we collected totally by lowering the tax rate. So it was very perverse. We weren't able to realize growth from new businesses. If, for example, Marriott, if they got an initial tax bill for like last year, we would collect that revenue. But if they, like this year they're opening, we wouldn't have collected the difference in their property value in our taxes. And if they paid the taxes, you would have had to lower the rate on everybody else to offset the taxes they paid, which means we always talk about grow the businesses, grow the economy so you can realize the tax benefits. We had a system where if you grew the economy, you shrunk your tax revenues. Not a good system. So, and thankfully, you all were part of this and getting this changed. And that's a big deal for Montgomery County. So, we're into my budget now. I'm excited. It's the first budget I'm excited about. The last 3 years of budgets were basically less than 1% increases over the previous year, which just wasn't even inflation. And so you can't do much new when a budget goes up 1%. You know that you operate a business. If you budget another 1% in expenditures, you're not doing anything exciting with that. And so the county was trapped. COVID was a problem. The first year of the old tax regime was a problem. But this year, it's amazing. Property values have come back. Both commercial property and residential property are healthy. There's competition for commercial spaces in Montgomery County, particularly life sciences, and it includes converting offices and other warehouses into life sciences properties. When I came into office, we had a shortage, for example, of lab space, and nobody would build lab space here. Last week, I was talking about we've got 3 million square feet of lab space under planning and under construction. This week, that number is 4 million of lab space. And there will be another announcement in a couple of weeks that's probably going to take us to 6 or 7 million square feet of lab space. This is huge. We've landed big companies. Just announced today a company coming from California. Horizon Therapeutics came here from Ireland. We were in competition with Philadelphia. One of the principals lived in Philadelphia. We won. I went out and met them on site, talked to them about what Montgomery County was going to do, where we were going to go, and they picked Montgomery County over Philadelphia. You will see a lot of new companies coming into Montgomery County. That grows our tax base. These are good jobs instead of retail jobs, which do not pay enough for people to sustain themselves. So we're getting good jobs back into the county, which is why our revenues are growing. When people tell you that people are fleeing Montgomery County, people are not spending 10 and 15% more for a house this year than last year because they're fleeing Montgomery County. There's competition to get houses in Montgomery County, and that's because people understand this is a good place to live. And I think, we're on a good trajectory. I came in and I always got knocked for, people would say you're anti-business. It's like, first place, my gripe was with the developers because we didn't get infrastructure. So it wasn't business. It was about, am I going to get the transportation and schools that I need? Because if I don't get that, people don't want to be here. And if you have to pay for it, I'd have to raise tax rates on our residents, and people don't want that either. So the ability to get businesses to pay for the infrastructure we need is what I've been asking for. And I'm making good deals. I have pretty much signed every single project deal that's come in front of me to go forward, every single one, because particularly when you're talking about high tech and life sciences, they all pencil out. You can look at the employees they're going to be bringing in, multiply their salaries, calculate the tax rate, and I'm not giving away more than I'm taking in. I'm taking in more than we're giving away, and it's a good thing. So I've been very aggressive about doing that. I've been out meeting business leaders to make sure they get the message that we're in business in Montgomery County and we're serious. I know I play against type, that people expect me to be very different, but the stuff we're doing is getting us the money I need to support the social side of the budget and the school side of the budget. And it's getting people better jobs in this county, and it's going to lead, I think, to a much brighter future. So we've got a lot of money in this budget for climate change. My capital budget had $433 million of projects that have climate change elements, like changing our entire bus fleet, that kind of stuff. This budget provides the operating. So the staff in the climate change offices that'll help businesses figure out how to make their buildings more efficient. We've got an EV buying co-op for individuals and fleets. So we're going to help fleets get quantity buying deals on electric vehicles from electric vehicle manufacturers. We're putting chargers out there. We're working with Pepco to put chargers out on the streets so we can get away from the fear of range anxiety. Where am I going to find my charger when I run out of electricity? We gave record funding to the school system. The schools asked for $183 million more than the county council gave them as a guideline back in February. $183 million. So I started out, I found about 72, so I was going to give them 72 million more. And then I got their budget, and they were like, what they're asking for is just astounding. We got up to 147 million of what they're asking for. We're very close. And the only two things we're not going to give them are, they created a separate fund for their healthcare fund. It's $30 million. Then it's like a reserve fund. County charter says that the council is not going to appropriate a reserve fund to the schools. And my reserve fund covers the schools. My reserves are almost $600 million, 10% of all the spend. So if the schools run short, we are supposed to be the reserve. So I told them I'm taking 30 out there, and we're going to be your backup, so they won't risk anything. And sort of kind of fussing over 20 million. They've got $272 million the federal government gave them for dealing with COVID and for things they're doing in the school system to address COVID. They put not a drop of that money in this budget. So we've asked them to find 20 million and put it in the budget. That way you've got everything you want and we can go forward. But our budget, the money we gave them, funds all the teachers, all the salary increases, all the benefits, and every single program they had. So I hope we're going to reach a peaceful conclusion with them. But even if we fuss about it, it is record spending, and it's going to help us recover from COVID. My budget, I have 42 million left in federal funding. We didn't put it in the budget. We didn't spend it. We're reserving it in case we need more money to support the community over the next year. So rather than appropriating it, since we were so healthy, we could meet all these needs without doing that. We left it aside. So I'll stop there. I was very excited yesterday about my budget because it's the first time since I got here that I could create a budget that reflected my values in any way, shape, or form. And my first budget, when I got here, I took office, December 4th, 2 days later, they called me downstairs and said, you have a $45 million hole in the revenue shortage. You have to cut 45 million out of your first budget, which was Ike's budget. It was the budget I was in. And by March, the state came down and said, you got another $50 million hole in your income taxes. So I had to live with $90 million in cuts in my first budget, which affected not just the one we were in, but the one we produced. And my worst experience was sitting there with all these grants and programs and trying to find, how do I cut $90 million away from people who thought they were getting $90 million? It was the most painful, unpleasant thing I've done since I was elected. And I'm so glad that I could look at budgets this year and say, what can I give you more?
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Thank
well,
you.
we have several questions here. So thank you for that.
Yes.
So I'm going to share with you that I think it's very difficult to be in your position as the governor also, or the president, because when you are in a leadership position, the challenge is making sure that people understand where you're coming from. So when you talk about, we have these dollars in revenues, or we have this budget, the people, because you're voted into office, the people who go vote may not understand the relationship between what you're budgeting or your excitement about having been able to get this revenue and what does it mean to them. So I think your challenge is to put that message out on how do these things, initiatives that you're doing, impact in a positive way the resident of Montgomery County, right? So I think that that's always going to be no matter, I mean, we can either agree with some of the decisions you make or disagree with it, but I think your challenge is making sure you explain where you were coming from and how this makes life better. So if we hear we're getting these big businesses in here, or we're getting more lab space, for example, where I understand there was a shortage of lab space and how important that is, the voter doesn't necessarily understand why this effort or this investment was important. So there's your challenge, and I understand that, but I think that your job is to see how you can make that connection in your messaging to people. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to offer that, right? And one of the things that I always thought was a good image is that when you have a king size bed and you have a queen size blanket, you're trying to, when you pull it to one side, something else gets uncovered, right? So it doesn't matter where you pull, something else gets uncovered. So having said that.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So I always think about that when we're talking. I do have some questions that came in from people. And there was a question about you having, or somebody in the county having said that there are dollars in new business investments this past year. And what does it mean to have made investments in, put dollars in new business investments? And what does it mean to have put money in venture capital funding? And I'm not sure I know the answer.
So the venture capital funding wasn't ours. This was money. This was actually one of the more exciting stories. This county got $18.5 billion of investment from the private sector in Montgomery County companies. That's like 3 or 4 times more than we had ever seen before, which told us that people are actually willing to invest in companies in Montgomery County. That was the story here, because people think that we'd reached, we were stagnating. That's the story you hear on the street. And we were stagnating, but we're at a point now where people are looking again and saying, we want to be here. These companies want to be here. We're going to invest here. when I use the word invest or talk about what we put into deals, we don't own anything, so we don't get shares of stock or anything else. We basically make a decision that we'll make, and we do a lot of this with the state. We'll make a grant to a company in exchange for them coming here. Everybody does an analysis of number of jobs and wages of jobs and property taxes and all that. And as long as they pencil out the way they should, we make the deal, because it's just, I think of it as an investment. But the truth is, we're paid back not by the company so much as paid back by the employees and the rents they pay or mortgages they pay. So in that sense, that's how we calculate that we're actually getting a return on investment. Does that help?
I hope so. Does it help?
Tony.
Well, the question is, did it help you understand what we were doing?
Yeah.
Tony, feel free to speak if you have your microphone. You can unmute yourself.
Oh, he's putting in a message. He's sending a message in. It's fine. In the meantime, I guess we'll wait for the message. But there were questions related to when we are supporting businesses. Okay, the Tony's response is $18 billion is amazing. So the answer is also 800 million in venture capital. It says 18 billion, 800 million in venture capital, and where does that money come from, and what does that mean?
That venture capital is just private sector people, these venture firms who they invest because they decide this is a place to be. I mean, for years, we weren't seeing much venture capital. Even if we had funds around here, they were playing in other jurisdictions. So they're actually seeing what this county can do now. And we have an amazing confluence of biotech. I'm not going to take credit for biotech. I didn't invent this. I didn't bring it here. But what I did do was make sure that they could tell a different story when they were out there, and they can encourage other people to come here. And that when people looked at Montgomery County, they weren't turned off by bad stories. But we've got a good combination of things going on there.
Right. So I'm going to go to the next question that we received. And the next question we received is, how are you going to fix the congestion problem in Montgomery County? Oh, that's a big question, right? So I know that you can't solve it, but there have been a lot of people talking about that you're not appreciative of the congestion in Montgomery County, and that because you seem to be opposed to widening the some of the roads, and that maybe you're not sensitive to all the hours spent on congestion.
Let me try to be clear about that. I hate congestion. I hate it myself. I would never put up with what people put up with. I've never allowed myself to. Driving from where I live to Rockville is the longest commute I've had in my entire life. I just generally would not do that. And if I wasn't going against traffic, I definitely wouldn't do that. So a couple of things. One is, when I was on the council, I proposed the reversible lanes on 270 along with Phil Andrews when he was there. O'Malley had come down with a widening proposal, and we realized they needed 2 lanes of traffic, southbound in the morning and northbound in the evening. And we realized, why build 4 lanes and have 2 of them sit empty and also not collecting any revenue if you're going to do tolls? Why don't you just build 2 reversible lanes? And Virginia does this. You run them south in the morning from Frederick, and you run them north in the evening back the other way. And I drive to Rockville. There's no traffic going north in the morning to Rockville. The traffic is all loaded up going in the opposite direction. And the same is true in the evening. So when the governor made his proposal, I came back along with some of my colleagues and said, no, we want this to be reversibles. And if it was reversibles, it would also be affordable. It would not go into any of the neighborhoods, particularly on 270, and you wouldn't need a toll. So I'm proposing solving your transportation problem without a toll and giving you the equivalent capacity, which is what people wanted, was 2 lanes south and then 2 lanes north. The governor's proposal stops at the ICC, which is what I was afraid of. And I warned people. I said, there's no relief north of the ICC. He has no plan north of the ICC. The consortium has no obligation to build anything north of the ICC. And even one of the principals in Transurban, which is the toll company that's going to build this, said that you're going to have a major problem at 270 where it hits the ICC, because it goes down to the existing number of lanes and it's going to be a giant traffic jam, which I pointed out from the very beginning. I didn't need 2 years of studies to realize that, because I'm a traffic geek and I've been looking at this for a while. So, and I'm the one that suggested the governor start at the American Legion Bridge, because he was going to start at the back. And I said, why do you start at the back of a clog when the clog is in the front? Relieve the bridge and then start relieving things beyond that. So my proposals are pretty simple. You do the reversible lanes, you invest some money in Marc going to Western Maryland. That road has a ton of people every single day coming down from Hagerstown and points west, and just jamming that road as tight as you can make it. I don't believe for a second that if you had train stations in Hagerstown, in Frederick, and a couple of other places that connected into that line, and you ran the trains in both directions, you got to add the second track on there, right. That you would actually take people off the road, and it would be environmentally good, which is a plus, but it would relieve the traffic. You do reversibles and you do trains, you're going to have the traffic relief. And I want the traffic relief. I never said don't do anything. I said from the beginning, even when I voted at COG and said you shouldn't do this, I said you need to have a solution that goes from the bridge to Frederick. I didn't say you shouldn't do anything. It was, I need a comprehensive, complete solution. I still think that's true.
Okay.
The other thing,
go ahead.
So I'm also the guy who proposed the bus rapid transit network for Montgomery County. I did this almost 12 years ago. I proposed 110 lane miles of bus rapid transit that would have its own dedicated lane in a peak direction, which should provide massive amounts of transit in this county, which we do not have. The business leaders in the region have said the biggest problem in the region is the bus network in the region is terrible. And they've called for more bus rapid transit. COG did a study, put bus rapid transit at the top of the study for what people need to do. I'm the only person out there in Montgomery County who's been harping on this and insisting on this. And so now I've got 2 projects we're submitting for federal funding. We're going to add the lower part of 355 from Bethesda to Shady Grove. We're submitting for Shady Grove up to Montgomery, what is it? Not Montgomery Village, but the Mark Station up there. And we're submitting for the Veers Mill Road one. With the money we think we may get from the governor, we're going to submit for 355 South. This would begin to put in line something that people can use. Mm-hmm. And we're going to change the ride-on system, because if you think about it, with George Avenue, Connecticut Avenue, Wisconsin Avenue, and Colesville Road, there are neighborhoods surrounding that are often served by, our ride-on system, but those routes are really, really long and really, really slow and stuck in traffic. Yeah. We're going to turn the neighborhood buses into circulators that take you out to the main line. The main line takes you to where you want to go, and all the lines connect. So if you want to go up the pike on Rockville, you could go on a line going down Colesville Road, go over to 355 and get on a line that takes you north. So it's a true connected system.
Okay. I have another question from the people on the email that is about the small business procurement, and to make sure that you're not talking just about dollars, but that you're talking about on the local small business reserve to show that there is significant diversity in terms of the numbers of awards. And it looks like there's a challenge in terms of how many good opportunities there are available for local small businesses, and if those are available to just the same old people, or if there's some effort to opening up the door to different businesses.
So we're seeing actually more winners in the small business arena. I could come back to you. I can make sure we get you numbers that you can share with your group. But we not only increased the dollar spend, but we were increasing the number of companies that were winning. The whole purpose of much of what we did was to open up the ability of people to see contracts and bid on contracts and to get more people into the mix. So we're happy to do it. And I recognize I could give a few contracts for a lot of money. It would help very few businesses. We've got to be able to do both.
Okay, we have a very quick question here about whether or not you're going to replace Judy Stevenson and the Small Business Navigator because she was really great and everybody loved her.
So we're adding 2 more Small Business Navigators.
Okay.
Just so you know, when I was on the council, we created the Economic Development Corporation, and Ike totally stripped out the entirety of our economic development group. And when I got elected, I wanted to bring that back. And I've had varying success with the council. We see our incubators, 2 of our 3 incubators are terrible. The biotech one is great. The other 2, you would never miss them if they were gone. So we brought back a full plan on how to revitalize the incubators, and the council didn't even read it. They just asked EDC to do it, whatever, and not even do our plan, just to do something. So we're working with EDC. We think we need to bring this back. I wanted, when I was on the council, to revitalize economic development at the county level because EDC focuses on big companies. I wanted something that was focused on small companies. So before COVID hit, we had done a tour of all the regional service centers, and we were going to have our kind of business ambassadors in the regional service centers so they could work with local small businesses, get to know the people in the shopping centers and the retail strips, and find out what they needed. This is what we're going to go back to. That's why we're adding 2 slots now. We are ready. We think we can do something with the incubators to make them more vital. I'm very committed to trying to grow your end of the economy because there are more jobs there.
All right, thank you. Mauricio, do you want to take
another
the question from one of our listeners?
In the chat about climate change. What are your climate change proposals and what is their significance to the business community?
The business community is going to be part of the change we all have to make. You know, over the next 8 years, we're going to have to transition as many businesses from gas fleets to electric fleets. We're going to have to transfer buildings that are heated by natural gas to buildings that are heated by electricity. We're going to have to help people insulate their buildings and, if need be, replace windows. And the county government is going to continue to assemble money that we can use for grants or low interest loans to help people make that transition. We know this is not easy. Dealing with climate change will be worse. If this country doesn't get a handle on it, we don't get a handle on it, the implications for the health and well-being of everybody are not very good. So we understand we don't expect everybody to have the resources to do this right away. That's why we're going to be putting resources in to help people make that transition. It's a big lift, and hopefully a federal government that actually cares and 51 senators who actually care would make a difference in our ability to get funding from the federal government. You know, the feds were prepared to put billions of dollars out there to do the kind of stuff that we want to do. That money would have wound up in the hands of people who were fixing their buildings. I'm not going to fix your building. Somebody else is going to do that. And we just have to hope that soon we can reverse that and we can get that money back out into the community. But we will work with people. We're not going to shut people down, because if I shut you down, I don't achieve anything. I lose jobs. But we're going to try to help you manage the transition.
Okay, and we have so many questions and so little time, but I wanted to make one last question for you. What makes you be the best candidate for being county executive for a second term? Why do you think, what is it about your knowledge, your abilities, and your desire that is going to make you the best candidate people should choose for our next county executive? You have to talk about yourself. Yes.
Yeah, that's hard. Well, first thing, I think Personally, I think, and I've had other people tell me this, that I showed real leadership under COVID, that, I withstood all the barbs, all the attacks, all the politicalization of this, and stayed on a track that led Montgomery County to probably be one of the safest places in this country to be. And I did that knowing that I was going to take an enormous political hit for doing it. But I realized, my job is to keep people safe and keep you all from dying. And that's what I went out and did. And so if I pay a political price for that, I pay a political price for that. But it goes to, kind of who I am. I'm not about politics. I'm about policy. I mean, I don't play political games. I don't put my finger in the air and take different positions on different days because I can calculate, even worse, in different rooms in the same week. Because I'm not interested in trying to be everything to everybody. I'm trying to, provide leadership and direction. I feel that, when I came into office, and it's really funny listening to the people I'm running against. I mean, what are they running against? The lack of jobs, right? And a lack of housing and a lack of affordable housing. And they say that I was the no vote on everything. I was the lone no vote. I like that because it makes a point. So they had 10 years of running things their way. They're running saying there's no jobs, no housing. The things they said they were going to do, they didn't bring you. And now they're blaming me and say, look, we don't have jobs and housing. Look at the county executive. It's like, no, these are your policies. You told everybody that I was the one vote that said we shouldn't do this. I was right, we shouldn't have done this. Like, the fundamental question is, or the problem is, that just rezoning something, just giving somebody more density, doesn't bring anybody here. People come to a place because of climate, I don't mean environmental climate, I mean business climate. They come because of schools, they come because of parks and recreation. They come because they feel they can be successful there. We had a number of negatives that have been piling up over the years about people's perceptions about Montgomery County. Nobody proposed doing anything about the perceptions. I'm the one that went out and started meeting with people and saying, tell me why we're so bad. What do I got to change to make this different? And when people told me that, I acted. I feel like I'm responsive. I am very driven to solutions. So I'm not ideological about my solutions, but my goal is to figure out what works. And so I don't put everything through a lens of, I believe this and I can't possibly do that. I'm giving money to corporations, even though my instinct is they really got a lot of money, but I would rather have the business here and make sure this county can grow than hold up some principle that you shouldn't give money to anybody anytime. And so I've been willing to do what I need to do to get this county to move. And I was right about the zoning didn't work. The people didn't come here. And here's the other killer. This is the thing that drove it home for me. You would not believe this from the way people talk, but Montgomery County is the lowest tax jurisdiction in the region. We're the lowest tax jurisdiction in the state of the big counties. And compared to Virginia, Fairfax, Loudoun County, Arlington, and Alexandria, we're the lowest tax jurisdiction also. And that's the thing that kind of drove this home. If you've got zoning, which will let you build anything, and you're the lowest tax jurisdiction, why aren't people coming here? And obviously there must be something else. And I turned my attention to the something else. I focused on making sure we could rekindle the life sciences industry and make that thing boom. This is why I went to the University of Maryland and spent 2 years. Things don't happen overnight. 2 years getting the university system to agree to bring graduate level research into life sciences to Montgomery County in order to help provide the workforce and the talent that the life sciences industry needs. So that when somebody from another jurisdiction says, should I go to Montgomery County? You can say that this county is consciously producing the talent and the workforce that you need. That's why last week, the University of Maryland presented to us a proposal to build a $40 million building in White Flint to become a research center for artificial intelligence and machine learning, and what do they call it? A research institute for artificial intelligence and machine learning, primary focus on tying that into the life sciences industry. But the second focus is tying it into the hospitality industry and working with hotels. And Marriott had actually approached them about could they help with their technology with the hoteleries, and they're going to actually bring that capability to Montgomery County. So, and nobody's done that before. Nobody's done that before. So I think I've got a record of being able to do things. And I got in White Flint, I got WMATA to agree to a joint development agreement to bring, not only to bring development to the White Flint Metro Station, but to turn the White Flint Metro into a life sciences center, because they went out and hired Jones Lang LaSalle. You all probably know Jones Lang LaSalle. Mm-hmm. Jones Lang LaSalle, they were asked by WMATA, tell us what the highest and best use of their property was. They came back and said, the highest, best use of your property is life sciences, which is what I had been saying. So we're going to wind up with a metro station focused on life sciences already, because I've been talking about this all the time I've been here. Every major developer in White Flint has flipped projects from residential over to life sciences project. Doug Furstenberg just announced a big project. JBG's got a project. Fritz got a project. The learners are looking at life science companies. I'm going to make this place pop. And I'm going to make it pop because I was deliberate about what I did. I just didn't say zoning, zoning, zoning. I tried to figure out what was I missing? What was this county missing? And how do I address it? So look at the companies that are coming here. We'll provide you a list. It's a pretty impressive list. Look at what's happening in the world of laboratory space. Look at what we're going to be able to do with the university. I actually have done something. I'm not complaining about Mark. I know, my campaign is I can actually do this. I've got this county set up. I got us through a recession and have the healthiest budget we've had with revenues that are growing. This is not a dying economy like they're all talking about. This is an economy that is blossoming and on the verge of truly, I think, truly emerging as a world leader in this technology. And it didn't happen by itself.
Okay, well, great. And I want to let Mauricio close it up because I think he has some comments or questions that he wants to do. But before I do that, we won't delve into it, but I would love it if something fantastic happens in the Wheaton Plaza area. It really begs for being a center that brings it up and makes it more the place to go if you want to have a fantastic dinner and an art show or something. Just leaving it there with you, okay? And I know.
Just so you know, back before Strathmore was Strathmore,
yeah,
I proposed putting Strathmore in Wheaton.
Oh wow!
I said if you put this on Rockville Pike, there's no restaurants.
Right.
There's no. If somebody wants to go to dinner, they got to go to dinner someplace. They can get back in their car and come to Strathmore. I said, if you put it in Wheaton, Wheaton would have bloomed. You would have stimulated restaurant development. You would have stimulated shops. You would have turned Wheaton from a place that everybody, looks down on to the gem of the county. Putting that on Strathmore, where it doesn't augment anything in Montgomery County other than it's a nice place to be, it would have been better in Wheaton. So trust me, I think about Wheaton a lot. I grew up here. I had my first job in Wheaton Plaza. So I look at this and I'm thinking about, I want to make sure they get a piece of this. That's why my BRT hubs through Wheaton. With the BRT systems built out, from Wheaton, you get Connecticut Avenue all the way down to Bethesda. You get Fears Mill Road to Rockville. You get Georgia Avenue up to Albany and down to Silver Spring. It was meant to be a hub for this region.
Right.
And I will
get the Gala Theater to open up another spot in Wheaton. That would be awesome. And I'm turning it over to Mauricio, who's probably driving him nuts. Thank you very much.
And actually, the last question I had here comes actually from Wheaton and Silver Spring, and it has to do with the security and all the issues that we've had over the last year. we don't have enough police force. Montgomery County has seen a spike in crime and all across, but particularly Silver Spring and Wheaton. What's your plan to help this area become safer and more friendly for pedestrians and anybody who wants to do business here and live here?
So, we've already started working on that. As far as the police force goes, I recognize that we were shrinking the police force over 2 years ago. And I negotiated an increase in their pay, particularly at the early levels, so we could attract more police officers here. The council didn't pass it. Now they're all for it. And we're sending over another contract that they can vote on. But we understood years ago that when you pay slips and you're doing this job and these guys are getting subjected to large amounts of abuse, none of those things are positive for making a decision to go into policing. And we wanted to start addressing that. So that's one thing we're doing. In conjunction with Silver Spring, we renewed and expanded a contract with Pathways to bring additional mental health supports on the ground in Wheaton now. We were adding these emergency response teams, and we didn't add enough. And we realized that in places like Wheaton and Silver Spring, they were going to get totally tied down, either totally tied down with dealing with police and homeless, or they'll be totally tied down by crime, but they weren't going to be able to do both. And so we're increasing the staffing in Wheaton and in Silver Springs. We've got more people on the ground. I just opened the shelter. I don't know if you guys know this, in Neville Street in Rockville, 200-bed shelter. That shelter means that people do not have to sleep outside anymore in Montgomery County. This is a huge change because the homeless folks that we see, they're outdoors 8 months a year. They have no place to go. We didn't have shelter space. The county's official embarrassing policy was you sleep outside 8 months a year. And that comes with a whole host of problems, as we know. Now, 200 men are going to be in a shelter where they have access to mental health services, 3 meals a day, a bed. We're not going to kick them out like we do in the other shelters, with the way we were doing, where you kick them out in the morning and say you can come back in the evening. We're going to let them stay there. We're going to let them watch TV there, work there, have a computer room where they can, work on other things that they're trying to do. So we're going to try to not just move the homeless population, but to move it to a place that we can start helping these people. So many of them are just there because they lost a job and can't make it, and then their lives deteriorate. And so we're going to make sure that they're in a position where we can make them as whole as possible and provide the supports they need. We are redoing the police districts. We're going to add a 7th district, and that'll make the districts smaller. They're way too big. If somebody showed you like the beat in Silver Spring, covers from downtown Silver Spring at the district line to Burtonsville.
Wow.
Too much.
Wow. Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to 7, and then we're going to rebalance the staffing, so the staffing reflects the call levels in the centers. They hadn't even done that, so they were using the old staffing patterns that had not been properly adjusted for what the calls were, where they were coming from. So you're going to see more police. They will have shorter beats, so it'll not be as challenging for them to get there. So I think between that and the social supports and the shelter, that we're doing things that are going to make a difference and help take some of the load off of what the businesses are dealing with there. And it's not just businesses. In Silver Spring, it's the library. They've had a major negative impact on the library. So we've got to make sure we give people a place to be. And I think, we'll find out pretty quickly if they stay there that, 200 people, if they're there in Neville Street, they're going to have to do some work to wind up someplace else. Hopefully a warm meal and a comfortable place to stay will entice them to stay where they are. Mm-hmm. They no longer have to hunt the streets for a place to sleep that night. Right. So, and if that, we'll do whatever else we need to do to deal with this.
Okay. Well, I certainly admire all the work you've done and certainly see the impact. So I appreciate your leadership and your willingness to stick your neck out and get pounded every once in a while. So, and come back. So thank you very much for that. And I wish you the very best in your campaign efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. And I hope we can do this again soon.
Carmen, you were quiet.
Good to see you. Hello, how are you? Very nice to see you. Yeah, thank you so much for being in this meeting, and thank you for all your work in the county. Yes, my question goes to the police, because the foundation with the chamber has the foundation, and we work with the students from high school. And we noticed the police are not there anymore outside the schools, but there are many other kids like in the bad path. So we need more mental health help in the school, and more after school activities. I don't know if you or contemplate that part in the budget.
There's a bunch of stuff in the budget for after-school activities that expands them. And, you know, the unfortunate thing is the school system was going to hire 50 social workers. And when they started, they thought they'd have them hired by September. I think by September, they'd found 2. I think they're up to 7. I heard a rumor, maybe 17, but they're nowhere near 50. But the moving of the police was tied to our ability to provide additional social work support. So you're going to see police, they're going to be not patrolling the halls, but they're going to be available at the beginning of school, at lunchtime, and at the end of the school. Again, not in the hallways, not patrolling, and they're not going to enforce school discipline, which is how this thing went bad in the first place, when principals started, you know, calling the police for things that were school issues. We think I'm sure by the end of this year and by the beginning of the next school year, they'll have those additional social workers. The school system, and we're funding this, is planning a restorative justice program that they're going to implement, so they can start talking to students and, you know, kind of unwinding the issue of how you got to where you are. Why are you doing this? And hopefully giving kids a sense of hope and possibility. We've talked a lot about trying to create some pipelines for jobs that go back all the way into the high school, so that kids see that there's a future. I taught 4th and 5th grade. And the most depressing 3-day conversation I had was when I showed the kids a movie. It's about a young Black kid, and he does something wrong. And I asked the kid at the end of the movie, I said, what do you guys think about this? And they just, everybody's like, well, you knew the kid was going to get in trouble as soon as you saw him on the street, because he was a Black kid. That was their mentality. And we started talking for 3 days. I had to bring the school's psychologist in, because the kids were actually saying things like, we're not going to live to be 25. I was trying to talk to them about their future life and what was possible. And the kids just looked at me and said, we're not going to live to be 25. There's nothing more depressing than having a 10-year-old tell you they're not going to live to be 25. And that is partly why I wanted to be where I am, because I wanted to be able to drive budgets that could address these kind of underlying social issues. But it's also why I supported things like minimum wage, and why I want, I believe in rent stabilization on housing, because if you're economically insecure, you know it if you're a kid. If your parents are struggling over money, and I could only imagine what it'd be like for parents to be saying, we're going to get evicted at the end of the month. Where are we going to go? Why don't you earn more money? Blah, blah, blah. And all these kids get subjected to that. They're children. They shouldn't be subjected to that. So to the extent that the things I do can help affect the economic stability of families, I think that's one way that you get a better handle on children. And then there's the investments in early childhood education that we're making. Because that's another thing. Kids who start on an even keel, actually, if you start in the same place as everybody else, you tend to stay there. And this is another lesson I learned when I was teaching, that a lot of kids, if they are not doing well, they don't want to be laughed at, right? Yeah, and they don't want to have a wrong answer, even if it's only on their paper. Yeah. And so there are two things you can do. You can either suck it up and figure out, I'm going to work really, really hard and I'm going to learn, unless you're too depressed and don't think that's possible. The other behavior is to say, I don't care. Because if you don't care, you don't fail, right?
Yeah.
If I care and I don't succeed, then I failed. But if I
Mm-hmm.
tell everybody in the class, I'm a clown, I don't care, this isn't for me, then you've taken yourself out of I'm failing. Nobody looks at you as failing. They think you're a clown, so you're no longer subject to ridicule because you've bought yourself out of the system. And realizing those things about kids makes you realize how important it is to get them started right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've been a champion of early childhood, because it costs real money. It's going to cost more real money. But the price we pay for all these children who are disconnected and come back to do what they do as they get older, that is far higher than the price we'd pay to educate them in the first place.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. And maybe the nonprofit, like is the field like I work with, we can help and work together, no, with the county and save and teach those kids.
I'd be happy to meet with your group.
Yeah. Oh, it will be great. The program that we have is really good and we have a very good outcomes, and I will be happy to tell you about everything.
Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Marc, again, thank you very much. Good luck with your campaign. And thank you again for joining us this series of conversations with elected leaders and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County. For everybody else that joined us, thank you so much for being with us today. This video will be posted on YouTube and our social media channels to rewatch. We'll make sure that we notify everybody in due time.